All right, so today we're going to talk about some of the frameworks. We've converted a website that was non-responsive into responsive, and if you were going to start your own from scratch, it's best to start it as being responsive in the beginning, as you can now well see, right, how difficult it was to do that project. So I want to show you some things in PHP Storm, and this is what not to do. So we're going to create a new project, and PHP Storm has built into it one of the things I want to talk about. We used this HTML5 boilerplate already, and they have a Twitter Bootstrap. So this, if I were to create this, and I'm just going to leave it untitled because I'm not going to use it, it actually goes out and finds on GitHub the latest version of the Twitter Bootstrap, because they're always changing it and adding features to it. So I can say, okay, I want version 2.3.1. And I'm going to have it in this window. And it goes and downloads all the data from the web, from GitHub, and creates me a project. Now, unfortunately, this is not a very usable project. There's no HTML directly in here. The JavaScript is here that they use, and the CSS is not. They use a different framework than Sass called Less, which is very similar to Sass. It has things like variables and things like that you can use. So you're welcome to use that if you want, but I've already started with Sass, and Rails uses Sass, so I don't want to learn a new thing. So, but it doesn't have the CSS in here at all. It's all in this docs. And so really what you need to do is to compile this and do some different things. It's really kind of a pain. So I don't like to do this at all. I don't want to use this project. The easier way to do this is to go and download the Twitter Bootstrap itself. So we'll do that in a second. In your web research, you were supposed to look up different frameworks, and there's the 960 grid. That I just want to show you. There's a bunch of different grids that are responsive now. That see, and what's funny is their top one is not. But it lets you, this one was a fixed grid for a long time, and then they made a 960 responsive grid. That's an adaptive system, but they all kind of work the same. So that's one, 960. There's one called Skeleton. That is another responsive boilerplate that comes with some JavaScript and some reset style sheets and all the style sheets with some styles that you apply to your own divs as you create them. So this one is nicely responsive, you can see. Very nice. And it has this grid system that almost all of the responsive sites use. You see how they change, and eventually they float on top of each other. All right, so that's Skeleton. There are a bunch of them, and the one that we're going to talk about in class is called the Twitter Bootstrap. This is used by Twitter. They developed it and put it out as a public domain, or not public domain, but open source. And if we go to twitter.github.io, this is the link to it, and they have their big download button here. Now, as I was playing with this, with their latest version, I downloaded this and was trying to look at some of their icons. And in the responsive version of this, they weren't there. They were not working. And I tore my hair out until I found out that I think they have a bug in their latest version that all of the icon style sheets are not in the responsive side. So ignore the big blue button download here, and we're going to go to this customize link up here on the top. All right, so customize lets you choose the various components that you want. And they have lots of things. This scaffolding, we're going to use a grid system and some layouts maybe. This normalize and reset. All right, so it has some JavaScript things, some jQuery plugins that we might use. We can customize the variables, like what do we want our background to be. I can do that right here in this customization before I download it, and then everything is in place for me. So I want everything selected because we're going to play with some of these things. And I want the responsive here. So we just want everything on. And I click this big customize and download button. All right, this will download a zip file of all those items that I chose eventually here. And if I open that, it's got 3 folders. Now, that's more like it. That's a little bit easier for me to deal with. I've got a JavaScript folder with some stuff in it. I've got images, which describe the icons that we're going to use, and the actual CSS. That's a lot less than all that garbage that Bootstrap template PHP storm gave me. All right, this is a little better. So I want to take that data and add it to my new project. So let's, in PHP Storm, let's create a new project that's just blank, and we'll call it Twitter. Call it Twitter Bootstrap. How about that? And it'll be an empty project. And it has nothing in it, which is good. That's what I want. And let's, I'm going to have to extract these. Sorry. Let's just copy these out of the zip file so that I can move them from there now into my Twitter Bootstrap. All right, so I've got my CSS. That, we can get rid of that. I'm going to move my images in here. And my JavaScript. All right, so I've got my 3 folders with all the things I need. And now from here, I can start to create an HTML template that utilizes this information. All right, so let's create a new HTML file. And we just want HTML. We'll call it index. What is that? Index.html. And there we go. We've got an HTML5 little boilerplate with all the things I need to start adding to this. All right, everybody with me so far? Any questions on what we've done? All right, so now I have to change my HTML to utilize this information. And we can go back to the Twitter Bootstrap, and they have lots of tutorials and things. There's lots of tutorials online. Let's go to the Get Started. And it talks about the file structure that we have. And this is the file structure that we have exactly. You can see that over here. I've got these icons and the JavaScript and some CSS that I'm going to include. All right. And let's go through a quick little template. They've got one already here, so I'm going to copy this all of this HTML because it's already including the CSS correctly for me. So let's just replace this. And now I've got a template that's using the CSS Bootstrap file. And if we look at this, this is already minimized. This is already very hard to read, right? Taking all the data out. And it's got lots of classes that we're going to play with. Lots of stuff. That's a very large CSS file, right? Now, typically, we're never going to have to look at that directly. All right. So the other thing that they added here, and this is something that you'll learn in JavaScript most of the time, and you should have seen this actually in the code school. They had you put the JavaScript for the page speed. Did you guys get to that yet? You put the JavaScript at the end of the file so that the browser has a chance to load all of the components it needs anyway, because most of the time, 99% of the time, we're not going to run JavaScript functions until the document is ready anyway. So why not load that last? Load that at the very end of the file, and it makes the speed of your loading of the website faster, because you've already got to load all the images and everything. Let it work on that first, then load the JavaScript at the end, and it makes better use of the multiple requests that a browser can do. So this is loading the jQuery and the localized Twitter Bootstrap JavaScript that we might make use of. All right, so let's just look at this file now. Open it in my browser. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that great? That's a beautiful responsive. Look, it's responsive too. Isn't that beautiful? So that's you're done. That's your website. You turn that in. That's your assignment. Yeah, isn't that nice? No, that's not quite it. So let's play with some different things now. What? Extra week to work on this? Yeah, I don't think so. All right, let's go back to the Twitter startup, and they have some examples here of some templates and things that we can use. They've got these starting templates that are nice, and they're nice and responsive already. And look at some of this nice stuff that we'll get into. This top menu bar here. If I make it smaller, what happens to the whole menu bar? It shrinks down to a nice little drop-down thing here, which already is responsive to your big fingers as you're looking at a smaller phone. So this responses all the way down, and those are nice menus, and I can collapse the menu and see more content. So there's some nice built-in functionality that I can get at here. Because there are jobs out there to convert existing sites, right? So let's choose this one. We can just copy the source. Why not, right? Let's just copy this whole source. This has the whole responsive stuff in it. And we'll replace my index now with that. And let's see, this might actually not work correctly. Let's see if it does. Yeah, it's pulling from the wrong thing. It's pulling from their site. So that's not going to work exactly like I had hoped. But it's still responsive. Look at that. Yay! Isn't that useful? Not so much. So, yeah, they have some different stuff. So we can't just use those. So I was just playing with that. Let's go on to the next example. Also look at, this is some of the things you can get at. This whole site was also built with the Bootstrap, right? Notice how this is kind of a side nav, but all it's doing is loading farther down the page. And as I scroll down the page, look at the nav change. So this works really well for a mobile device even. As I scroll to this, I can jump straight to a piece further on down, but it's still just one page that it loaded. Why have a whole nother page to load? Because with mobile devices, bandwidth is the big key, right? We want to make it as small as possible. So why re-download all this extra structure when you just have one page that you want to display. Works pretty well for that. All right. So let's look at the Bootstrap docs. And look at some of this information. Now, that looks better on the screen, on your screen than mine. This is the basic grid system. And let's actually take all this back and go back to what I had so that I don't mess that up. So everything is working on a grid system, and you can see that this is a 2-grid wide div. This is a 3-grid wide div, a 3 boxes, you can think of it, like 4 boxes wide. This is 9 boxes wide. And as you shrink it, you can do different things with it. At this point, they're all the same width, right? They have different widths that you can do. There's a 12 one here. So the idea of the grid, let's just show how to play with the grid to start with. If I have this code here, this is a div that we give it a class of a row, and that row is already defined for me in the Twitter Bootstrap CSS. Okay, that has different properties associated with it. Inside of that row, you think of the row as something that takes up the entire width of your browser. As part of that, I want a div that's going to span 4 blocks and a div that's going to span 8 blocks. All right? So if I look at that, let's put some garbage in here. Garbage. Bigger garbage. Rubbish, there you go. So if I look at that now, in the browser, I have 2 different blocks that are different sizes that are already responsive. If I get down to a certain size, they float underneath each other. Yes, that's what I was going to do. So exactly right. So let's have my own little style sheet that I'm going to add to this. And we'll call it main.css. Yeah, we'll do, oh yeah, we should do sassy stuff. Might as well while we're here, right? All right, and then in my file, I need to get that file. Now, don't do this. This will mess you up badly, right? You want to include the compiled version of the CSS, not the uncompiled version, right? So we want to always include the CSS file, not the CSS file. All right, so I want to make sure I'm adding my watcher here, and I'm going to add a div that has a border on it. 1 pixel solid blue. And let's relook at my page. And now I've got a nice little solid blue border around the divs. And you can see how this is just extra space on the side. That's margin that they added to your, yeah, that's the row div, right? So if I wanted to make that centered, how would I make that row div centered then? Well, let's add another class. We'll call it center. And they might actually. Let's just do one real quick. Then I'll go look. We'll have a class called center. And we're going to say margin is 0 pixels auto. And it should be now centered. Nope. Why not? Well, the problem is it also doesn't have a width, so let's make it. Yeah, it does. Yeah, we're getting all mixed up here. Look at that. That worked pretty good. Gives you a nice error if you make a mistake. I did that on purpose so you can see what that error is. See, that's a lot better. That nice and centered. Jeez. All right. So I changed it all around. I got off script here. This is if we change the class to row-responsive, that's one of the classes built into Twitter Bootstrap, and it makes that entire row responsive for width-wise. And that automatically, and I moved my hello world inside of that top row div, and I put a border on it, so now when we look at it, it's nicely centered on the page until I get really big. It's still centered, but as I get smaller, it makes use of the margin, and all of my divs underneath are collapsed or floated left. And that's all done automatically by the classes, the span 4 and span 8, etc. So all you have to do is remember that these have to add up to the number that we have. So if I'm using the 12 grid, if I want to add another one of these here, and I want it to sit on the same line, my span numbers have to add up to 12. So I'd have to switch these down to here, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, so now I've got 3. And in this realm, they're 2 across, and this one is 8. So that makes my 12 all the way across. I just have to remember that the number has to add up to 12. All right, so we'll play around with this some more.
Arbitrary total number, like if we wanted to do 2, we could do 2. If we wanted to do 18, we could do 18. 12 is just an arbitrary number.
No, that's the number of this grid that I'm using. You can have different grids. You can have a 16 grid and a 12 grid. I'm not. That's the default, is the 12. So, well, you go look at the documentation. So we'll do that. We're out of time. We'll look at that right now. Well, I'll stop my recording here.